sometimes, whether you want to or not, you have to listen to what God's telling you to do. And sometimes you can do it privately, and sometimes you can do it publicly. Right now, I need to take just a minute and apologize to Kathy for being short with her just a while ago and rude. And I hope that you'll forgive me. Just feeling a little stressed, and I did not mean to overreact. So I extend that to you right now. Thank you. So have any of you ever had a nudging feeling from God? You know that one that makes you really uncomfortable? And no matter how hard you try, you just cannot ignore it. You just can't get away from it because he just keeps poking and poking and poking. Well, it's been probably about 2 years now since I started having that little nudging feeling. That quiet voice that started saying, you need to prepare to start telling your story. My story? There's nothing special about my story. And remember, God, I'm not the one who does the public speaking. I think you have me mixed up with someone else again. Well, you know, he didn't quite see it that way. And he kept nudging me. So finally, I got brave enough one day to tell a friend of mine out loud, because I thought she would say, well, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. But Karen Fuller, why don't you tell him what you said? When I told you that. I don't remember exactly. Something along the lines of, yes, you do. Yeah. And you need to tell it.
I think it was something about, yes,
So, then last summer, I kept getting all kinds of hints. I would read a devotional, and it would be about telling your story. Or someone would actually come up to me and ask me what my story is. So, I'm going to bore you guys for just a little while with my story. And I hope you'll bear with me. This is the first time for me. And I'll be looking at my notes a lot, I'm afraid. For me, the challenge of telling my story was one word: transparent. Completely see through. Allowing people deeply into my personal life. Sharing my struggles, sharing my challenges, admitting to my weaknesses and my mistakes. And I knew that if I shared my story, I would have to willingly be completely transparent. I can't sugarcoat the truth. Who wants to give anyone permission to see that side of you? Smith Wigglesworth, and yes, that is a real person, he says, great faith is a product of great fights. Great testimonies are the outcome of great tests. Great triumphs can only come out of great trials. Lisa Turkris says, broken is what people are, beautiful is what God makes them. And then our good old buddy Luke, from Luke in the Bible, chapter 8, verse 39, he says, go home and tell everything God did in you. Well, how can you ignore that and argue with it? So here I am, fixing to tell you my hot mess of a story. It's a journey of grace greater than all my sins, and of a hope that wouldn't let go, and a love that has never given up on me. It spans several decades now. I won't tell you how many. But this morning I'm going to try to give you the relatively short version of how I went from crying often to selling coffins. On Saturday, September 2nd, 1967, Ode to Billy Joel was playing on almost everybody's radio. Lyndon B. Johnson was president, and I was born in a little town called Waynesville, North Carolina. Yes, that's in the heart of the Great Smoky Mountains. So I'm Southern, and I'm also from the mountains. You know what? That gives me permission to pull out y'all's straight, was my aunt, Mildred, and my Uncle John. And then right next to them were my great-grandparents. And on this side was my mama and my papa. So, yeah, I was spoiled rotten. I'm proud of it, guys. I was the first grandbaby, so you know what that means. My grandmother and I call her Mama. We quickly became attached at the hip. She is one of the most godly women that you will ever meet. And she's my own personal prayer warrior. We've weathered a lot of storms together. She's walked through them, each and every one of them with me. She taught me good manners. Well, sorry, Kathy, I believe that today. She tried. And she taught me how to be a good hostess. It's from her that I got my love of cooking and entertaining. And it's also from her that I learned that the smallest of details are the ones that often make the biggest difference. Matter of fact, this past week at work, I was standing there steaming a tablecloth. And one of the younger guys that worked for us said, "Why are you taking time to do that?" And I said, "Well, you know, nobody's ever going to notice that I steamed the tablecloth, but everyone will notice if I don't." Then, one day when I was about 5, my mother came in and ruined my life. She asked me the question, "Would you like to have a baby sister or a baby brother?" Really? Why would you want to have another child when you have the perfect one already? I asked my mom not too long ago what in the world made her think that she needed another baby. She said, "Well, I guess we just got caught up in the moment." Well, after much thought, I decided that I wanted a baby sister, and I wanted her name to be Stacy. What I got was a brother, and his name is Tracy. Go figure, God really got a laugh out of that one. Even though Tracy was, well, kind of cute, he came with a lot of problems. He had a lot of health issues when he was small. When he was an infant, he had asthma so bad that he almost died several times. The first 3 years of his life, he was in and out of the hospital so bad, it was just terrible. Then when he was 3, God miraculously and instantaneously healed him. And that's a story that I'm going to share with you another time, but it's a great story. Today, he's a pastor, and he has the most amazing singing voice in the world. A little baby that couldn't even hardly get a breath can just fill this room. Beautiful, beautiful music. That's God for you, folks. Well, it was not long after Tracy's arrival that I started to have the feelings of being left out and lonely. Now, I want to be perfectly clear here. My mother and daddy loved me, and they did everything that they could to pay attention to me and give me what I needed. But having a sick baby is very time-consuming. And of course, at that age, I really didn't know the name of the emotions that I was feeling. I just knew that things weren't right. My mama started the tradition of having me come and spend the night with her almost every Friday night, just to give me that little bit of extra attention. And y'all, you know what she fixed me for breakfast every Saturday morning? Chocolate gravy and biscuits. Now that's a Southern thing, but don't knock it if you haven't tried it, because it would become your best favorite breakfast treat. I'll have to make it for you sometime. Well, feelings of being lonely and left out and less than just kind of continue to plague me throughout my teenage years. My mom and I just didn't get along very well, as happens with a lot of us. And I was never able to form that childhood best friend that follows you all through your life. I was just always a little insecure and unsure of myself. I played the part of a good little Nazarene Christian girl at home and at church, but at school I was a different person. I felt like the only way that I could fit in was to hang out with the wrong friends and use the language that they used. All the while, deep down inside, I knew I was letting God down. Well, one day in high school, this really handsome guy walked up to me and started talking to me. And it turns out I was actually standing there waiting on his best friend to come out. But as it so happened, we became high school sweethearts. And when I turned 18, we got married. He was good looking and funny, and he could sing just right? Well, marriage brought its own challenges. Remember me telling you how spoiled I was? Well, having to pay my own way, whew, that was a shock. And neither one of us had any money management skills, and we had quite a few problems because of it. And as bad as I hate to admit it, a lot of them were caused by me. What? You can't write a check if you don't have any money in the bank? I thought that's what they were for. But those mistakes would bring on feelings of failure. I wasn't a good wife. I couldn't handle things. 3 years after we were married, we had our first child. We named her Elizabeth Daniel. 21 months later, we welcomed our second child, a daughter we named Amy Mariah. Rusty named her after Amy Grant and Mariah Carey. Yeah, he had a major crush on Amy Grant, almost to the point of stalking her. Bless her heart. Well, we decided 2 was enough. We were done having babies, and God just laughed. Because 11 months and 4 days later, I had my son Casey. Whew. And that was the day that I almost died. April 25th, 1992. I just remember waking up about 24. Well, I just remember thinking to myself as I could feel myself just kind of fading, how is Rusty going to raise 3 kids by himself? That was my last cognitive thought for 24 hours. So I did finally wake up, and you know how you have visitors come and go. We had a retired pastor and his wife that came to visit, and I remember that the pastor looked down at me and he said these words: sometimes God lets us hit rock bottom in order to make us look up. Whew. Well, that hurt my feelings so bad, and it scared me. Because you see, I was still playing the part of a good Christian wife and mother, but on the inside, it was an entirely different story. And the more I played that role, the angrier I became. It was just a really, really bad time in my life. Let's fast forward a few years. We've been married 10 years. God had blessed us with a new home, and my husband worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs just so I could stay home with our kids and raise them. Now, he had been diagnosed with childhood diabetes when he was 12 years old. And he had taken very good care of himself for several years, but he sort of got off track, and we just never could seem to pull him back into the path that he needed to be on. And one day, he woke up and he said to me, "Dana, everything I look at is red." Whoa, that doesn't sound good. So I called the doctor called the specialist got us in that day. Well, that should have been my first clue. A specialist that gets you in that day doesn't happen very often. He had massive hemorrhages in the back of both his eyes from complications from the diabetes. Surgery would be needed immediately. The hemorrhages had to be stopped, and even then the doctor could not guarantee if he would be able to save either of his eyes. That was the last day that my husband ever drove a car before he went to work. He lost one eye completely and was legally blind in the other. Suddenly, I found myself with an almost blind husband, 3 young children, ages 6, 4, and 3, and no college education and no job. What were we going to do? And so began the journey of many complications over the next 10 years, including kidney dialysis 3 times a week for 8 years. Depression became my best friend. Loneliness, feeling unloved and unwanted became normal to me. Satan convinced me that my husband didn't love me enough to try and be healthy and stay alive for me. The lies that Satan weaves. God kept providing for us and blessing us with wonderful friends who helped us out so much. But the devil clouded that in my heart with all those feelings of untruth. I was so mad at God for allowing this to happen. How were we going to survive? How could I take care of him and work and give my kids a normal life? God had a plan, and he had it under control. Ladies, have you ever heard the saying that you find out who your true friends are when the going gets tough? Well, it's true. friend, who was my husband's best friend, volunteered to take Rusty to and from dialysis once a week. John drove 120 miles, approximately, round trip from his home in Asheville to ours, then to the dialysis clinic, and then back home. Every single week. Rarely missing one for the next 8 years. Ladies, that's true friendship. When he bought a new vehicle, he would bring it to our house first to make sure that Rusty could get in and out of it before he would buy it. That's dedication. Today, I want to publicly say thank you. John's our photographer for the day. He continues to be a huge part of our lives and comes to our rescue. Anytime we need it, just like today, just called him 2 days ago. I'll be there. I'm Asheville. That's another story for another time. Last week, on January 25th, it marked the 10-year anniversary of my husband's death. We had been married 20 years. He was 41 years old and I was 39. Our kids were 17, 15, and 14. I would like to tell you that life became easier for us, knowing that he was in heaven, but it didn't. Grief was not my friend. I had to be strong for my children and not break down. I had to move forward and put it all behind me. Get on with my life. I had been a nurse for 10 years. God owed it to me to make my life easier and to bring someone special into my life quickly. I just knew I would be married again within 2 years if God cared about me at all. That lonely feeling that I had tripled in my heart. Everyone ought to understand that I just needed to move on. I quickly joined one of those online dating sites. A few months, met a guy, fell in love, started putting him in front of everyone. It destroyed my home. My son moved out to live with another family. My daughter was so depressed she flunked out of college. My middle daughter moved out on her own, but kept her grief buried because I kept mine buried, and she and I had some terrible, terrible arguments. I failed as a mom after being such a good mom for so long, and I'm really ashamed to have to tell you guys that. Loneliness and feeling less than penetrated every cell in my body. I let down so many people and struggled financially. I left our home just sitting empty. I could not stand to be anywhere near where all those memories had taken place. I was lost, spiritually and emotionally. Satan was winning this battle. I couldn't even get along with my beloved grandparents. I just kept myself off from almost everybody in my life. Finally got to the place where I knew that I had to turn my life around, where I didn't know what I was going to do to myself. I had to get God back in my life and let Him lead me. Nudges from Him and a restlessness in my soul told me that if I could just trust Him, big changes were on the horizon. I knew that I desperately needed to find a career instead of just a job, but I had no idea what that could be. I tried to start my own event planning business, but that was when the economy was so bad and it just didn't fly. And then I took a job as a nanny, and I love those kids, but it still did not give me the fulfillment that I needed to find. In September of 2012, my grandfather became very ill, and I sat with him for 2 weeks in the hospital every day, and a lot of nights before he passed away. It was during this time that God got my attention. It was during those long nights sitting there next to his side that God talked to me, and my heart started to make that turn back to Him. We had just lost my aunt 2 weeks before that, and so I had been spending a lot of time in the funeral home helping my grandmother plan all the details. One day, one of the funeral directors said to me, "Have you ever thought about doing this for a living?" It was like a rush of wind just went right through my soul. I went home and I prayed hard about it. Was this what God wanted me to do? Could I take my experience with loss and help other people through theirs? Did I have what it takes? Well, within 2 months, I was enrolled in school, found a job at a funeral home near here, and moved away from all my family and all my friends, except for Rosamond. She lived down here. And that meant leaving my precious grandmother, who at the time was going through some very serious health issues. But I stepped out of faith, and I just told God, if this is what you have for me, you're going to work. You're going to work it all out. 4 years later, I'm still here. There have been some hard challenges along the way, and they've sidetracked me a few times. But those are, again, stories for another time. I'm still working towards my degree in funeral service, and I'm blessed to be working in a well-established funeral home as a funeral director apprentice. The first Sunday that I had moved to this area, I came to this church. I was scared to death. It was so different from my home church, and I wasn't really sure if I liked it. But I turned it over to God, and He assured me that this is where He wanted me to be. Excuse me. I have grown more spiritually in this church than any other church that I have ever been in. Not because this church is any better. I love my home church. But because I opened my heart and my mind to what God wanted for me instead of what I wanted for me. I stopped believing the lies that Satan told me all those years and started fighting back against those feelings of being lonely, less than, left out. Pastor Tom talked to me about beginning a grief share program here, and we stepped out of faith, and it has been so successful. God is allowing me to use my grief experiences to help others heal. He continues to use some of the talents He has blessed me with to be a blessing to others, and He continues to grow me in my faith. I am a 100% sold out Jesus girl.
Amen.
About a year ago, I started realizing that whatever, let me see if I can have a picture. No. I lost my place, I'm sorry. Anyway, okay, about a year ago, I started realizing that whatever I started my day with is what would consume me. Now, I am not a morning person. Do not talk to me before 10 a.m. Many can attest to that. But I knew that I needed to start my day with God. Not Facebook, not TV, not telephone calls. So I made a commitment to get up early for work and not get caught up on social media, but to get caught up with God. It meant getting up at 6:30. But you know what? I started to notice that as I talked to God through prayer, I was always running late for work. So I had to start getting up even earlier. But you know what? I don't miss that sleep. Matter of fact, if I do sleep in and skip my devotions, I can just tell you right now, my day is going to go downhill really fast. Phew. God has pushed me to pray and to talk to Him frequently. I never was a public prayer, but now I find myself doing that all the time. Not long ago, my precious grandmother was pretty sick, and I was talking to God about it and telling Him that I just was not ready to let her go yet. Who would be the prayer warrior in our family? Well, guess what the answer I got was? You will be. Phew, that's a huge responsibility. But I had a perfect example setter. God has laid people on my heart to pray for on a regular basis, and I love talking to God, and I do it all the time. It's as natural as breathing to me now. And I don't say any of this to brag. I say it to encourage you. Yes, God might ask you to step out of your comfort zone, but the blessings that come with it are like nothing you have ever experienced. Ladies, Satan knows that if he can isolate us, he can intimidate us, he can confuse us, and he can deceive us, just like he did me. He caused all those feelings to isolate me and almost have control of me. As he to your faithful Christian friend who leads you back to God time and time and time again. I have to do that with my friend all the time. Lily's that person for me, and I know she gets so tired of seeing my name pop up on her phone. If you don't have a friend like that, ask God to send you one. He will. He will give you one. Feelings can be fickle, and we have to dwell on much more than our feelings. We must dwell on God and fix our minds on Him. The road's been hard for me, but throughout all the trials, God is developing my character to match my calling. I've gone from crying often to selling coffins. I've had my share of trials and tests, just like all of you have. But remember the two great quotes that I shared with you at the beginning? Great faith is a product of great fights. Great testimonies are the outcome of great tests. Excuse me. Great triumphs can only come out of great trials. And broken is what people are, but beautiful is what God will make you. God has broken me so that I can share this great testimony of how He turned my life around and made my story beautiful. I read a story on Facebook not too long ago, and I want to read it to you guys. It says, there was a family that was in Dollar Tree, and there were two kids with them. One was a big kid, and one was a toddler. The bigger one had a pack of glow sticks, and the baby was screaming for them, so the mom opened the pack and gave him one, which stopped his tears. He walked around with it smiling. But then the bigger boy took it, and the baby started screaming again. Just as the mom was about to fuss at the bigger kid, he bent the glow stick and handed it back to the baby. As we walked outside at the same time, the baby noticed that stick was now glowing, and his brother said, I had to break it so you could get the full effect from it. I almost ran because I heard God saying to me, I had to break you to show you why I created you. You had to go through it so you could fulfill your purpose. That little baby was happy just swinging that unbroken glow stick around in the air because he didn't understand what it was created to do, which was to glow. There are some people who will be content just being, but some of those of us that God has chosen, we have to be broken. We have to get sick. We have to get a divorce. We have to bury our mother or our child or our husband. God is breaking us in those moments of desperation. But when the breaking is done, then we'll be able to see the reason for which we were created. I have a vase full of glow sticks here. And I want to extend an invitation to you that if you want to work on your feelings of feeling lonely or less than or unwanted or unloved, I want you to come up and get you a glow stick. And I want you to break it, and I want you to wave it around. And the altar's also open if you want to come and just lay it all down at the feet of Jesus. Who's the first one?